Good morning, good afternoon. I am Al Nathaniel Montañez from Section 1D, Bachelor of Science in Criminology. The topic that I'm going to discuss right now is the restorative justice. So, first, let's define what this restorative justice means. Based on my research, restorative justice is a system of criminal justice which focuses on the rehabilitation of offenders through reconciliation with victims and the community at large. So this simply means that this kind of justice isn't necessarily using any brutal or any type of retributive uh, punishment towards offenders. Instead, they use an ethical and holistic kind of reformation so that the offenders might be a useful citizens of a community. Okay, next slide. Introduction. Victims of crime or the survivors are frequently traumatized by their experiences. Some of them might be killed and others may suffer from lasting physical injuries. Because of this, different countries all over the world look for ways on how they could minimize the burden that these victims are experiencing with regard to punishment and giving justice for these victims. Our justice system establishes different methods to rehabilitate, reform, and treat criminal offenders. Yeah, and that's true. All throughout ages, crime is really a problem. You know, crime is really prevalent and rampant even back then until today. And though we cannot though we cannot totally remove that from our society, but the only thing that we could do is just to prevent it from massive spread. So people all over the world, especially specifically those people who work in a specifically those people whose work are to prevent this crime from massive spread are really looking for ways, work hard to find a way to minimize this kind of phenomena that we're facing. Okay, so acquiring justice for these people started from personal vengeance then to incarceration. Serving a sentence by the offender was considered a very good solution in providing justice to the offended party. But incarceration does not answer the problem in terms of correcting offenders and preventing them not to reoffend. Because of this, rehabilitation and treatment of offenders were introduced to answer such a problem. In some ways, it helps a lot in the reformation process of the offender. Aside from treatment and rehabilitation, community-based correction was also introduced for the holistic reformation of the offenders, providing opportunity for them to be useful citizens of the community. So this passage simply means that uh, this type of justice, uh, restorative justice, was now being implemented right now. No? So yeah, although measures were made in order to correct offenders and prevent them from violating laws again, sometimes this minimized the impact and the effects of the crime done to the victims. This paved the way in finding other means to fully establish justice for the victims, the offender, and the community. Um, let's turn next. Okay. The emergence of restorative justice. Okay. In the Bible, several scriptures would illustrate the concept of restorative justice. In Hebrew, the justice of God is not that God rewards those who are good and punishes the wicked. God is just when he intervenes in the lives of those unprivileged, especially orphans and widowed, to save them from the abuses and injustice made by men. God is just when he defended the innocents, when he saves the poor and those who exploited the wicked. Yeah, okay, so for me, in just my own opinion, this justice, restorative type of justice, was somehow alike and was somehow originated back then, specifically in the Bible, because uh, the reference is God, and God is not the type of God who rewards immediately those who are good and punishes the wicked, but instead God treated the same treated the people with equality. No? But time will come that the wicked will gonna be really paying the price for their wickedness, and good people will gonna be receiving rewards for their goodness. Yeah. Okay, so another context of restorative justice was under the Code of Hammurabi. The principle of lex talionis, which means an eye for an eye. The concept of lex talionis, or the law of proportionality, simply says that we could not claim more than the value of the damage. If the stolen property is worth $100, then you cannot claim $200 in return. This type of justice really is, for me, in my own opinion, it's really a justice that would be really implemented, because this type of justice, principle of lex talionis, would simply give relief to the offended person, uh, to see their offender paying the price, paying the punishment that they really deserve. Okay, so the emphasis on the above concept was usually on restitution and restoration. Restitution was seen as how things are done in a righteous way. If a property was stolen, then the stolen property must be returned. If damage was done in one's property, then the person responsible for the damage should repair it, as it should. Okay, so next slide. In your own words, explain how the restorative system affects the criminal justice process. Okay, so for me, in just my own opinion, the restorative system affects really the criminal justice process in the way that it will give somehow an inequality, no, and injustice toward the offended people, because this type of justice really favored offenders, no, really favored offenders to just being reformed, instead of being paid for the being paid for what they've done, or facing the punishment that they really deserve. That would somehow create a kind of confusion, anger, and resentment toward the offended people, because that was kind of an unjust kind of system. Okay, so when does restorative justice start, and how does it improve the administration of justice and the restoration of the offender and the victim? So the answer will be found in okay, in the 1960s, there was a debate on how victims and offenders were given an opportunity to confront and resolve their issues. During the 1970s, Mark Yancey, a probation officer, arranged for two teenagers to meet directly with their victims following a vandalism act and agreed to restitution. Its positive effect led to the first victim-offender reconciliation program in Kitchener, Ontario, Canada, with the support of the Mennonite Central Committee and in collaboration with the local probation department. The concept cascaded through North America into Europe through the 1980s and 1990s. Okay, this was next slide. Um, Overview of restorative justice. Restorative justice is a process whereby the party in a particular offense, victims, offenders, and community come together to resolve collectively how to deal with the aftermath of an offense and its implication in the future. It also embraces a wide range of human emotion, including healing, mediation, compassion, forgiveness, mercy, and reconciliation. Under restorative justice, victims and offenders assume each other's responsibilities. This process involves the notion of reparation, not punishment, at the center. As I said before, as I said before, this type of justice is really a type of ethical and holistic kind of reformation towards offenders, and this type of justice really primarily focuses on uh, reconnecting, reconnecting the broken relationship between the offended people and the offender. No, so yeah, the ERET ways, or the ERET ways of understanding restorative justice, in which E stands for empowerment of the parties involved in the wrong committed. R stands for repair. Crime causes harm, injustice requires repairing that harm done. E stands for encounter, wherein the best way to determine how to do that is to have the parties decide together in settling its disputes. And lastly, T stands for transformation. This can cause fundamental changes in people, relationships, and communities as a whole. Other books enumerated four characteristics of a restorative program, or the four key values of the restorative program. Number one, encounter. This is created when the victims, offenders, and community members who voluntarily meet to discuss the crime and its effect or aftermath. The elements of encounter are meeting, narrative, emotion, understanding, and agreement. So this simply means that uh, they will gonna have discussion or solution about what is going to be, you know. So yeah, amends. This is done when the offender take the necessary steps to repair the harm that they have caused and inflicted. Four elements of making amends are apology, change behavior, restitution, and generosity. Reintegration aims to restore victims and offenders as a whole. The elements of reintegration are acknowledging human dignity and worth, providing material assistance, and offering moral spiritual direction. Inclusion creates opportunities for the parties with a price for a specific crime to participate in its resolution. Examples of inclusion are invitation, acknowledgement that each individual are unique and has different views, that he or she may want some other alternative ways or approach. Oh, okay. Restorative justice core values. On the discussion presented above, we are able to understand the concept of restorative justice. Furthermore, restorative justice is based on the balanced focus on the offender, victim, and community. The values according to each participant are offender, apology or shaming and integration, the victim, the harm, the opportunity, forgiveness, and community relationship. The outcomes and measurements for restorative justice program are based on the following values. Number one, the offender, apology. It is done by the offender either through oral or written form, recognizing his accountability and not just seeing himself as a victim, realizing and acknowledging the harm and pain that was experienced by the victim. This is really just, no, it's really just for the offender to make an apology, because he or she are the ones who is responsible for the pain the offended people of experiencing, so that is really just for them to make an apology. Reintegration, making his or her place back in the community, particularly done through the action plan developed under the healing and repairing the harm. So yeah, the victim harm, this is done through assessing the harm done, developing a case strategy or plan to repair the harm, and creating an action plan for those responsible for healing and repairing the harm. Forgiveness. This the opportunity is given to the victim to accept an apology from the offender and to extend forgiveness. The community relationship. This is done through healing broken relationship and creating new relationships. Theories on restorative justice. In studying the concept of restorative justice, many principles and concepts are established. The following are some theories established in restorative justice. Reversal of moral disengagement. This is a moral psychological theory concerned with the psychology or behavior of person as observed in relation to moral matters. This is manifested or expressed in terms of the moral judgment of right and wrong. Hypothesis shows that moral re-engagement plays an important role in restorative justice. That begins with the observation of activities that when someone engages in activities which are harmful to others, they will tend to keep their conscience silent by means of various internal mechanisms of moral disengagement. Albert Bandura identified four of these psychological mechanisms of disengagement. Number one, rationalization of the good consequences or practice which one thinks outweighs the bad acts done. Bandura calls it moral justifications. For example, I rob rich and corrupt businessmen in order to give it to the poor. Number two, minimizing or lessening the accountability of one's wrongful activity, such as the offender's claim that it wasn't my fault, I was just told to do it, or I was just looked out and did not participate in the commission of the crime. Number three, denial of the seriousness of the harmful effect on others. Examples are, it's okay, they will be fine, or I only get small piece of their wealth, they don't matter. Number four, blaming and discriminating or otherwise derogating the victim. Examples, it was her, as a prostitute, that's why she was raped. To social and moral development. Morality may be viewed as a socially constructed reality within which people's behavior is judged in terms of what is morally right or wrong. Thus, it is understood that morality plays an important function in society. It facilitates harmony and peaceful coexistence. Peaceful coexistence and social harmony are heavily dependent on the moralization of society's individual members. Individuals who were failed with the moralizing process and who were unable to give effect to the important values, social norms in their lives may become sources of danger and misery to others. Learning from one's own and other people's mistakes and misdeeds forms an important part of individual social and moral development. Yes, yes. If a certain persons act opposed to what is morally right and wrong in their respected country, nation, provinces, then she might be considered as a perpetrator within society. Okay, and with that, the action might lead to the fall and fall and destruction of one's community if they aren't aware of the moral standards that their place have put on in order to follow them. Okay. Number three, emotional and moral psychological healing. Ratzinger and Schaff have observed that there are two processes occurring side by side in a restorative justice conference. The material and symbolic reparations. The process of material reparation results in a final settlement between offender and victim and typically consists of specific agreements about compensating the victim, community service, etc. The process of symbolic reparation is less visible. It is composed of gestures and expression of courtesy, respect, remorse, and forgiveness. According to Ratzinger and Schaff, the core sequence, consoling of the offender's apology and the victim's forgiveness, is the key to reconciliation of victim satisfaction and decreasing recidivism. This observation generalized These observations are generalizable beyond conferencing to restorative justice meetings in general. According to restorative justice philosophy, closure and emotional healing for the key participants are the vital characteristics of restorative outcomes, and symbolic reparation plays a recognizably crucial role in their achievement. Symbolic reparation is what allows and precipitates emotional healing journeys being successfully undertaken by the relevant participants. A journey in the course of which people can rid themselves of the moral, psychological, and emotional burden from an oppressive and hurtful past. The consideration highlight not only the importance of strong supporter representation in restorative justice meetings, but also the importance of good training for facilitators. Reintegrative shaming. According to John Braithwaite, reintegrative shaming are the following definition. Number one is definitely present in what are generally accepted to be highly successful restorative justice meetings, especially the case where important people in the offender's life are present as active participants in the meeting. Number three explains what is confirmed in conferencing practices time and time again. Before the importance of involving as many significant members. Um, it is under and lastly, the definition of reintegrative shaming is this. It is under such condition that it becomes most likely that the offender themselves internalize the distinction between what they did and who they are. And once this happens, they are almost to align themselves once again with their family and community and will not hesitate in unconditionally rejecting their own wrongful behavior as clearly unacceptable, which is perhaps the most crucial first step in the process of successful restoration and healing. There are few things as distressing or aggravating to other participants, not least of all the victims, the defiance of indifference to the offender. Okay. How will you explain the concept of restorative justice based on its own theories? Um, are we gonna uh, the concept of restorative justice based on the theories was simply basing based on their own perception, I guess. Yeah, draw your own concept of restorative justice. I could not. Sorry. Okay, restorative versus punitive justice system. First of all, uh, retributive justice is a type of justice that that primarily focuses on demonstrating brutal or just punishment to the offender, while restorative is what I said earlier, that this is ethical and holistic kind of justice to reform offenders. So let's just define and differentiate the two. Okay, so I'm gonna go first with the retributive, as we were talking about restorative all the time. So we'll just go ahead with this type of justice. Retributive justice: crime is an act against the state, a violation of the law, an abstract idea. The criminal justice system controls crime. Offender accountability defined as taking punishment. Crime is an individual act with individual responsibility. Punishment is effective. Threat of punishment leads to a crime. Punishment changes behavior. Victims are peripheral to the process. The offender is defined by deficits. Focus on establishing blame or guilt on the past. Did he or she do it? Emphasis on adversarial relationship. Imposition of pain to punish the dealer or prevent. Community on sideline, represented abstractly by state. Response focus on offenders' past behavior. Dependence upon proxy professionals. Restorative justice. Crime is an act against another person in the community. Crime control lies primarily in the community. Accountability defined as assuming responsibility and taking action to repair harm. Crime has both individual and social dimensions of responsibility. Punishment alone is not effective in changing behavior and is disruptive to community harmony and good relationships. Victims are central to the process of resolving a crime. The offender is defined by capacity to make reparation, focus on the problem solving excuse me, liabilities, obligations on the future should be done, emphasis on dialogue and negotiation, restitution as a means of restoring both parties, goal of reconciliation and restoration, community as a facilitator in restorative process, response focus on harmful consequences of offenders' behavior, and emphasis is on the future. Based on this, restorative justice is much more community centered and focuses on making the victim whole as compared to retributive justice. Another illustration is presented below. Retributive justice. Misbehavior offenses are committed against authorities and are violation of rules of law or policies. Offenders accountable to authorities for the misbehavior or offense. Accountability is equated with suffering. If offenders are made to suffer enough, they have been held accountable. Victims are not primary focus of the process. Offenders are defined by the misbehavior offense. Victims defined by material and psychological loss. Misbehavior offenses are the result of individual choice with the individual responsibility. Restorative justice. Misbehavior offenses are defined as acts against victims in the community which violate people and the community trust. Offenders accountable to the victim and the community. Accountability is defined as taking responsibility for behaviors and repairing the harm resulting from those behaviors. Success is measured by how much reparation was achieved. Victims and community are directly involved in play to a key role in response to misbehavior offense. Offenders are defined by their capacity to take responsibility for their action and change behavior. Victims are defined by losses and capacity to participate in the process for. In summary, restorative justice offers a more humane and holistic approach to justice as it focuses on the needs of victims and offenders instead of the need to satisfy the rules of the law, the need of the community to give out punishment. Victims are given an active role in dispute and offenders are encouraged to take responsibility for their actions, to repair the harm they've done by apologizing, returning stolen money, or doing community service. Restorative justice is based on a theory of justice that focuses on crime and wrongdoing is acted against the individual or community rather than authorities. So, in summary of all that I said, restorative justice was really primarily focused on more humane, holistic approach to justice. As they also find the offender was also a human being that needed a consultations and guide in order to change their mind, they change one's thinking and behavior. And so the whole principle of this restorative justice topic was primarily for healing and reconciliation. That's all. Thank you.